I really like to trim my skirts back quite a bit, and my weed guard you can see at a 45-degree angle there. I just think that makes the profile much more attractive, and then your hookup ratio is so much better. Little guy. Snuck out there and got him a bite of swim jig. But I mean, hey, you know, that's a start. That's what these little guys are, they're growing. Just goes to show you they're at the top of the food chain. On a swim jig, just a really good subtle way to cover water, period. I'm just covering water with a moving bait. I like to throw the bladed jig, I like to throw the buzz bait, but when I get into a situation to where there's too much vegetation in the water, like this bank grass, we call it potato grass down here where we're at, I will pick up a swim jig. It's just a much more efficient way. I don't get hung. I can fish it to the bank. I can fish it all the way out to the edge, and I can't do that with a bladed jig or a buzz bait. So when I talk about ideal swim jig water, you know, things like that, you see the scattered brush out here and the scattered grass and things like that. This is just a really good body of water right here and a good area to throw a swim jig, because I can fish it over. I can go all the way to the bank like I did, and even though this is a shallow flat, I can go as far back as I want and run that swim jig out just subsurface there, bumping over all of my little stalks of grass and laydowns and anything else that's in the water that potentially will hold a fish on this flat. Which you can't do with a bladed jig or even a square bill or anything like that most of the time, because you're just going to stay hung up constantly. Just another good scenario to see exactly why this is a great way to fish this bait. Yeah, let me think. Let me get my, there's one. That is why you throw a swim jig right there. I mean, just a great showcase of what it does. So, just a chunk. I threw up on that point, and we've kind of got out of the heavy cover, but I've still got this swim jig in my hand. I roll through these areas quickly with these, you know, aggressive baits such as a swim jig and a bladed jig, and I dial in the areas where I'm getting bit. Then I can come back, slow down with a much more subtle presentation and catch all the fish that are there. All that I'm doing right now is identifying the high percentage areas where there are a lot of fish that are feeding, and they do it quickly on these aggressive baits like a swim jig. So when we come and fish new water like this with these moving baits, what that does is, you know, it allows us to build a pattern and to start to understand where the fish are setting up, whether they're in the pockets, out, and then we can kind of make a game plan from there and come and fish the other, you know, fish other baits and just catch more fish, because it's not just one bass. Usually when you get into an area, when you get multiple bites like that on a moving bait, you're going to get a lot more fish in the area. You just got to figure out another way to catch them with a different style of bait. That's one thing that a tournament angler and an everyday fisherman have to understand, and they have to start to dissect, is, are there many fish in that area? Is there a group of fish here that you can slow down and catch? Or is it going to be simply you have to cover water to get more bites? And once you figure that out, if there's, you know, fish in a certain area and you can slow down and catch more, or is it a cover water game to where you just need to keep hitting fresh water because there's just not that many fish in an area? All that stuff comes into play, and it's the decision making that puts you to the top. And so fishing my swim jig, I can fish it so diversely. I can fish it from obviously, you know, 3-4 inches of water to where I'm swimming it across the top of vegetation, all the way out here to 4 or 5 foot of water to where I'm over the top of some laydowns and things like that. It's such a diverse bait, and it's also really, really weedless. That's the, you know, another big key about it. So, you know, it's one of the reasons I keep it on the deck of my boat and that I fish with it year round. Always a good, you know, imitation of a bluegill is a swim jig. That's you know, pretty much, it's spot on. It's kind of got a bulky profile. It moves a little water when it comes through. It doesn't have a lot of vibration. It's really subtle, natural, and that's what really gets a lot of fish to react, I think, when they're not super aggressive like they would be on a spinnerbait bite with those blades thumping, or a bladed jig. When that, you know, you have that huge thump of a bladed jig when it comes through. So it's just something I've grown up with, and something that I really feel like I've dialed in over my career and over my years of fishing. And once I started to really understand the power of a swim jig, it'll take your fishing game to a whole new level. And, you know, in a lot of your lakes, the forage base changes. A lot of lakes, you know, they're like, hey, we just don't have a whole lot of bluegill, or hey, we just don't have a whole lot of shad. Well, here in Texas, we have a lot of bluegill and they grow big. And it's a big forage for bass. So that's kind of where I dialed this whole swim jig in, was learning about bluegill and how to imitate them and mimic them the best I could. So, you know, your lake may not have the forage like we do here in Texas of bluegills, and you may need to go to a white swim jig, or you may need to go to a gold swim jig in Florida to imitate a big golden shiner down there. Those are just things that you have to keep in your mind. And then once you do and start putting them to use, I think that you'll find out there are a lot more ways to catch bass out there than just, you know, the conventional bass fishing. There's really no right or wrong way to retrieve a swim jig. I pump a jig a lot. And I'm basically worming it over these flooded laydowns and bushes and grass clumps. And all that is I'm just making it mimic a fleeing baitfish from something that chased it right down the bank and it's just trying to get away. So anytime I feel like a bass gets around a fleeing baitfish and it's in distress, that's kind of a key opportunity for a bass to feed, and most of the time they will. So I mean, it's such an aggressive bite. It's such a fun way to catch them. You can go fast. You can slow it down once you get to the back sides. You get to see them eat it a lot of times. There's just a lot of fun that goes into it. Your flat trailers, you know, they will, when you put them on your swim jig, and then you're able to skip with it better. It gives it more surface area to hit the water and to skip it. And then when it does hit the water, it comes up and rises higher in the water quicker because you've got that flat surface area to catch water to drag it up. And that's really what I like to do when I'm fishing around shallow vegetation most of the time is throw something that's a little flatter with a lot of kick to it, because it helps give the bait drag and pick it up higher in the water column quicker. Oh, dude, quit on me there at the end. But he absolutely choked. Perfect hook right in the top of the mouth. I mean, that's what it gets you. I mean, it just gets you, that's a lot of fun. You got to see that fish blow up. It's quick. A lot of times if I throw up there and I'm throwing something slower, you know, as shallow as that water is, that fish may not be able to get over there to it in time before it gets down in the mud. When I'm fishing around, I really like to throw a little bit longer rod on a swim jig. It gives me more connectivity when I go to swing on them, and I can make long casts with them down the bank. A 7.4 medium heavy is good for me, with a high-speed 7.5 to 1 reel, and then 50-pound braid again. Pretty basic stuff, but yet heavy enough to winch them out if they do get me into these grasses or anything like that. And I really like a high-speed reel to help keep that jig high in the water column quick. I don't have to work near as hard with a high-speed reel to keep my bait high in the water column and be able to see my bait and actually get to watch the fish come and eat it. Right on the backside of that grass was perfect. Not a giant, but another just absolute perfect hookup.